Welcome back, everybody. How is it going? Today we are going to be building this calculator that has very similar constraints and functionalities of a real iOS calculator. So stay tuned because I'm going to be breaking down a lot of JavaScript concepts used in this project. Now, before we get into the video, let me just show you a brief demo of how this calculator works. So of course, the arithmetic operations work perfectly. And we also have the all clear button for clearing the values on our display. And we have the delete button for deleting our values by 1 digit. And of course, if you notice, our display value is formatted with a comma, okay, after every last 3 digits. We also have a constraint on the decimal point so that it doesn't get repeated. And we have a constraint on the operator symbols as well, so that when I click on a new symbol, the last one gets replaced. So that's about it. Let's get started with the video. As you can see, I already have my folder created on my desktop. So I'm just going to open this with my VS Code. And now I'm just going to create a new HTML file, which I'll name index.html. So let me close this, and I'm going to type an exclamation mark and hit enter so that this HTML boilerplate will be generated for us. We want to change the title of our document. This is going to be called iOS Calculator. And I'm going to open my page on our browser. So this is our page. Inside the body tag, I'm going to create a div with a class of calculator. This is going to be the container for our calculator. And inside this div, I'm going to create another nested div with a class of display for our display section. And inside that, I'm going to create 2 more nested div. The first is going to have a class of previous operation and an ID of prev operation. Okay, then I'm just going to copy and paste this again using the shift, alternate, and down arrow key. But I'll change this to current operation and this as well. And I'm just going to set the value of my current operation to 0. Okay, the value is always set to 0 by default, as you can see here. Then under my display div, I'm going to come down and create another div with a class of buttons. That is going to be the container for all our buttons. Inside it, I'm going to create button elements for each of our buttons here. So I'm going to say button, and my first button, which is the all clear button, will have a class of gray and an ID of clear. So I can type AC here. Let's go back and see what it looks like. AC. I'm just going to copy this 3 more times. Okay, that is for the first row of our calculator, first row of buttons. The class for this and this is going to be the same. I'm just going to change the ID. This is going to be the negate button, lowercase, negate, and the clear, this is going to be percent. So let me just change the values. This is going to be plus and minus. This one will be percentage symbol. And for this one, it's going to have a class of orange. That's the division sign. I'll give it a class of orange. And instead of having an ID, I'm going to give it a data operator attribute, because all the symbols here are operators. They're going to have the same attributes. Data operator. And it's going to have the division sign symbol. So I'm just going to come here and pick my sign, copy it. You can get your sign online, just browse it. Okay, so I'm going to paste it here and paste it here as well. As you can see, this is our first row of buttons. So we want to have about 5 rows. I'm just going to copy this 4 more times. And I'm just going to change the values accordingly. This one is going to have a class. They're all going to have a class of black. For the numbers, because we have numbers here, instead of having an ID, they're all going to have an attribute of data number. I'm going to set this the value of 7. Same here, it's going to be 7 for this row. Okay, so let me just copy this and I'll paste it. I will just change the value. And for this one, it's going to have a value of X. This is going to be the same. I think I'm just going to copy this instead. I'll replace this. Okay, so this is going to be 4, 5, 6. Same with this. And I'm just going to change the value of this to plus. Okay, so now we're in this row. It's going to be the same thing. I'm just going to replace this with this. The classes are going to be the same. I'm just going to change the value. This is going to be 1, 2, and 3. And I'll change the value to plus. And now we have the last row. For the last row, it's going to have an ID. Let me replace this again. So this button is going to have an ID instead. It's going to be set to delete. And the next is the 0 symbol. It's going to be a data number, 0, 0. And the next is the decimal. It's going to have a data number attribute as well with the decimal point. The last button is our equal sign, which will have an ID set to equals. Okay, and for the value of our delete, I'm going to come back here and copy this. You can get that online as well. All right, so that's all for our HTML. We can begin styling. Let me show you what it looks like now. This is what it looks like. So we can begin styling with CSS. Just going to come here and create a new CSS file, style.css. And I'm going to make sure that it's properly linked to my HTML. I'm going to come back here directly under the title tag. I'll type link. I'm going to pick this. So our file is properly linked. I'm going to start by setting our margin and padding. Our margin and padding to 0. Just to get rid of all default spacing on our document, on our page, as you can see. And I'll set the box size into border box so that when we create a width and height for an element, the padding and the border gets factored in. Okay. Next, we want to style the body. I'll give it a font family set to Arial, sans serif, and the background is going to be this color. And next, I want to center my elements to the middle. So I'm going to use display flex, justify content, center to center it horizontally, as you can see. But I'm going to give it a minimum height of, let's say, 100 pH. Then I'll set align items to center. So as you can see, that's all for our body. Let's style the calculator container next. If you remember, we used the calculator class for our container. I'm just going to copy it. Now type a dot because it's a class. I'm going to give it a width of 320 pixels and a height of 550 pixels. The background color is going to be black. As you can see, this is our container, and it's going to have a border radius of 20 pixels so that the edges, are rounded. I'll give it a padding of 20 pixels as well, and I want to give it a box shadow so that it has a shadow effect. I'm going to set it to 3 pixels for the x-axis, 9 pixels for the y-axis, 18 pixels for the blur effect, and I'm going to give it this RGBA value. The RGBA just means red, green, blue, and alpha. Red, green, blue is just the combination for the color you want to use, and alpha is for the opacity degree. When I click this, the red is going to be 0, the green is going to be 0, and the blue is going to be 0. My alpha is going to have a degree of 0.5. Okay, so you can see the shadow effect. It's looking good. Next, let's style our display section. That is this section, okay? This div. Let me give it a background color just so we can see what we are working on. Going to be red, so that is our display. And I'm going to align the text to the right by using text align. Right. It's going to have a padding of 10 pixels. The maximum height is going to be 120 pixels. Next, we're going to style the previous operation class. I'm going to style that later when we begin our JavaScript code. We're going to see why we would need it in our JavaScript. So let me just style the current operation class instead. I'm going to give it a font size set to 40 pixels and a color of white. And I'll give it a height of 60 pixels. So next we want to style the buttons container. I'm going to give it a display of grid. So now, as you can see, our buttons are in a grid, but I want it to be in 5 rows, just like this, and 4 columns. So I can use grid template columns. And I'm just going to say repeat. That is, let the buttons get repeated for 4 columns. Okay, 1FR just means let it be divided into equal spaces in those 4 columns. And I'll set a gap between the buttons of 10 pixels. So let's style the individual buttons now. Because it's an element, remember we use the button element here, I don't need to type a dot before the element. I want the button to have a width of 70 pixels, same with the height. And I want to give them a border radius of 50% so that they are circular. And I'm going to set the border to none and outline to none as well. I'm also going to increase the font size of the fonts to 30 pixels. And lastly, I want to set the cursor to pointer. So when I hover over them, it has a pointer sign. Now our buttons are overflowing our container. So I'm just going to come back here and increase the width to 350. Okay, that's good. So next, let's style the colors of our buttons. I can go ahead and remove this color here. I'm going to add a color to the fonts of the button. It's going to be white. Then I'm going to type the gray class. For the gray buttons, I'm going to have this background color. And I want when I hover over the buttons, it's going to have a lighter color. So I'm just going to copy this and paste. Now I'm going to come here and say hover. This is going to be a lighter color like 888. Okay, so when I hover over the buttons, the color changes. Let me just add a transition so that it changes gradually. As you can see, so I'm going to do the same thing for the other buttons. I'm just going to copy this and paste. For the orange buttons, this is going to be orange. And for the colors, I'm going to give it an orange color. The hover is going to be a lighter orange. So this is what it looks like. And I will do the same for the black buttons again. This should be black. Now set the color to this value. This one is going to be lighter. Okay, so our calculator is looking good. I think I made a slight mistake with our symbols here. This should be a minus sign, but not to worry, we can just change it in our HTML. Going to come here in the third row and I'll change this to minus. Alright, so our calculator is looking good. Now we want to make it functional and dynamic using JavaScript. I'm just going to come here and create a new JavaScript file. I'm going to come just directly above the body tag, no TypeScript. I'll select this option and select my JavaScript file. Now that it's linked, what's the first thing we want to do on our calculator? We want to select all the button elements on our calculator and the display section. I'm going to use the constant keyword const and the name of my variable clear button. This is going to be for the all clear button equals document, because we want to target the whole document, dot get element by ID. That is the correct method for getting the ID of an HTML element. So I'm going to type the ID. If you remember, in our HTML, we gave our all clear button an ID of clear. I'm going to come back here and type it. And I'm just going to duplicate this about 4 more times. This is going to be negate button, and this is going to be percent button. This one will be delete button, and the last will be equals. I'm just going to change their IDs accordingly. Next, I want to select my number buttons and my operator buttons. And if you remember, instead of giving them an ID, we gave them attributes of data operator and data number. I'm going to come back here and select them. I'll give the numbers a variable of number buttons. Instead of using get element by ID, we are going to use query selector all, because I want to select all the buttons that have an attribute of data number. And I'm just going to do the same thing for the operator buttons. This is going to be operator, and the attribute is going to be different too. So when I log this, so when I log our variables to the console, we can see the HTML elements that we have selected. Let me do that here. Let's log the clear button. I'll open my console here by clicking on inspect. So as you can see, this is our clear button element. So let me select the number buttons. This is our number buttons, and as you can see, it has a length of 11, showing that there are 11 number buttons in total. That is all the numbers that have the attributes of data number. Okay, so it shows that we have selected all the data numbers. Okay, so what if we want to make our buttons to display on our display section whenever we click on the button? Okay, so we're going to start with the number buttons. I'm just going to come here and say number buttons. I'm going to use the for each loop, because remember we have about 11 buttons and we want to loop through each of them. So I'm going to use for each loop, and I'm going to give it the parameter of button. Then I'm going to come down here and add an event listener to each of our buttons. I'm going to say button dot add event listener, and the event we want to listen for is a click event. So on click, we want to get the text content of our buttons. So I'm going to use button dot text content. Okay, when I log this to the console, let me log it. When I log it to the console and I click on a number, we will see the value of the button in our console. Okay, so we want to put these values into our display section. So to do that, we're going to first, let's select the display and the previous operation section. I'm going to say const prev operation. Get element by ID. Remember we gave it an ID of prev operation and current operation. I'm just going to type it in my JavaScript. Then let me just duplicate this. This is going to have an ID of current operation for the current display section, and this too. Okay, so now that we have selected our current section, our display section, I'm going to come here. We now want to put the values that we're getting when we click on a number. We want to put it into the current display section. So I'm going to say current. I'm going to come here and say current operation dot text content equals button dot text content. I can go ahead and remove this from the console, and now when I click on the number, it gets displayed on the current section. Okay, so that's how this works. Let me just put this down a bit. Okay, so it gets displayed. Now the next thing we want to do is to append numbers, so that when I click on a number and click on another, it gets added to the digits and not replaced. We're going to use an if statement. Okay, we're going to set a condition. We're going to say if the first digit, if the current operation dot text content already has 0, because it always have a 0. Let me show you. If I come here and log current operation dot text content to the console, we're going to see the value here. As you can see, it's 0. Why? Because we set it by default to 0 in our HTML, so the value is always going to be 0. So now to set the condition, we're going to come here and say if current operation dot text content is equals to 0. Okay, that is in the beginning of our calculator when we haven't done any operation yet. Then do this, then replace that 0 with the button that was clicked. Okay, else, let me put this inside here, else we want it to be appended, we want it to be added to the number that has been clicked. Okay, so I'm going to say current operation dot text content plus and equals to button dot text content. This just means current operation dot text content. This is the same thing as this equals current operation dot text content plus button dot text content. Okay, so when I click on a number at first, it gets replaced, but when I click again, it gets appended. Okay, so now that's working well. We want to be able to click the operator buttons, so I'm going to come down and create a function for the operator button and add an event listener to them. So I'm going to say operator buttons. I'm going to use the for each loop as well, because we have about 4 operator buttons, so we want to loop through each of them. I'm going to give it a parameter of button again, and then I'm going to use an arrow function. Then I'm just going to say button dot add event listener, and that's going to listen for a click event. Okay, so when we click on an operator, we want it to get appended as well. Okay, so I'm going to say current operation dot text content plus and equals to button dot text content. Don't forget to put your semicolons. It's always good practice. Okay, so when I click on a number now and I click on an operator, it gets appended. So as you can see, so now I'm going to we want our equals button to be evaluating our expressions. Okay, so I'm going to come down again and I'm going to add an event listener to the equals button. Equals button dot add event listener, and it's going to listen for a click event, right? Arrow function. So what we want is when we click on the equals button, it evaluates the expression in our display. So I'm going to use the eval function in JavaScript. The eval function just evaluates an expression in JavaScript. So I'm going to say let result equals eval. I'm just going to put current operation dot text content. Okay, so we are telling to evaluate the current expression in our display. Then I'll come down here and say current operation dot text content equals results. So our display should now be replaced with the results. So let's see. When I do 6 minus 6 equals 0. So as you can see, it's working. But then when I do something like this, let me refresh my calculator. When I do something like this, it gives us an error. Okay, as you can see in our console, it gives us an error. And why is that? It's because JavaScript does not recognize this symbol for arithmetic operations. Okay, so I have to replace this with the symbol that JavaScript recognizes, which is the asterisk, and I have to replace the division sign as well. So I'm going to come here and say const, let's say cleaned expression equals current operation dot text content dot replace brackets, and I'm just going to type the X, and I'll use the global modifier, the G flag, and I'm going to replace that X with the asterisk sign. So this just means that this G just means perform a global search for this X and replace it with asterisk. That's wherever you see this X, replace it with the asterisk. And I'm going to say replace again. This one will be for the division sign. I'm going to come back to my HTML and just copy the division symbol. Okay, then the G flag. Now I want to replace that with this, because this is the symbol that JavaScript recognizes. So instead of saying evaluate bracket current operation dot test content, I'm now going to replace this with the cleaned expression. Okay, so now our multiplication sign should be working. So as you can see, now it's working. When I do division as well, it works well too. So the next thing we want to do is when we are done with an operation and we click on a new number, we want it to replace the former number that's on our display instead of being appended. You see, just like I did here. Let me do another operation, times 9 equals this. I want when I click on a new number, it appears as 5 and not 17645. So first of all, I'm going to set a flag. I'm going to come back here and I'll set a flag for when my screen should be reset, when my calculator should be reset. I'm going to say let should reset screen equals to false. So it's set to false by default. I'm going to come back to my equals button, and after our evaluation runs, I'm going to reset the screen to true, and then I'll come back to my number buttons and I'll set another condition. I'll say if should reset screen, then I just want to replace my current operation dot text content with my button dot text content. So this condition here checks if should reset screen is true or false. So if it's true, then we want to replace our current operation dot text content with button dot text content. Okay, and since we have set it to true in our equals button, that is immediately after an operation, this condition is going to return true. That means this function is going to be carried out. Then I'm going to come down here and reset my screen back to false and type the return statement so that my function escapes here. So this should work now. When I complete a first operation and I begin another, see it works now. It starts afresh. Okay, so one thing we can do is to put these conditions into one if statement so that we don't have so many lines of code. So we can come here, I can put this if statement, this condition, that is if current operation dot text content is equals to 0, then we want to do this. You notice they have the same action in this line. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this and come here and use the or statement. If should reset screen is true, or if current operation dot text content is equals to 0, then do this. So we don't need this anymore. I'm going to delete it. Okay, and then we can now remove the return statement since we have else. So this just checks if this is true or if this is true. Okay, and it's important to use the or statement because the both of them don't have to be true. If you use the and statement here, it checks if the both of them are true before it carries out this action. Okay, but when you're using the or, both of them don't have to be true. It just picks one that is true. Okay, else then append the button. So if we check now, our calculator still works well. If you notice, when we finish an operation here, the old operation goes on top and the result comes down. Okay, so we want to do that in our calculator. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back to the equals sign, equals button, and I'm going to come here and just before our calculator evaluates, I'll say previous operation dot text content should be equals to the current operation dot text content. Okay, but before I show you how that works, we have to go back to our CSS and style the previous operation. Remember I said we're going to style it later, right? So I want to give it a font size of 20 pixels and a height of 60 pixels, and the color is going to be gray. All right, so when I do this now, as you can see, the previous operation gets replaced with previous current operation. So let me just reduce the height of this so that there'll be less spacing between the both of them. Okay, so that's good. Now let's go back to our JavaScript. We want to work on our all clear button and our delete button so that when I click on the all clear, it gets rid of everything on our display, and the delete button gets rid of current operation by 1 digit, by the last digits until it goes back to 0. I'm going to come back here and under my equals button function, I'm going to say clear button because I want to add an event listener to my clear button. dot add event listener. Again, it's going to be a click event. When I click on the all clear button, I want my current operation dot text content to be set back to 0. Okay, and I want my previous operation dot text content to go back to being empty. That is in a situation where we have finished evaluating an expression. Okay, and when we are done evaluating an expression, should reset screen is going to be true. So we just want to set that back to false. And okay, let's see if that works. Okay, so that works fine. So now let's work on the delete button. Delete button that add event listener. The logic here is going to be a bit different. When I click on the delete button, I want it to get rid of the last digits, okay, until my display is empty. So I'm going to come here and say current operation dot text content equals current operation dot text content dot slice 0 minus 1. So now when we have some values in the display and I click on the delete button, so as you can see, it gets deleted one by one. But then when the display is now empty, I want it to go back to 0. So I'm going to say or when it's empty, just set it back to 0. So now we have this. So as you can see, it goes back to 0. Okay. But in a situation when we have concluded an operation, I also want to clear the previous operation section. So when this goes back to 0, I want the previous operation section to go back to 0 as well. Or better still, I want it to go back to being empty once we've reached 0. I'm going to come here and create an if statement. If current operation dot text content is equals 0, then reset the previous operation dot text content back to empty. So now let's see if that works. Alright, that works. But okay, let me show you some things that are not working properly. You can see the operators, it gets repeated, and that is not supposed to work like that. So we're going to work on that so that the operator buttons don't get repeated. I'm going to come back to our operator button right here. I'll come here and say const last character, last char equals current operation dot text content dot slice minus 1. This just means we want to get the last character that is currently on our display. Okay, so that's what slice minus 1 does. So let me show you. When I log this to the console, log last character, it gives us the last character that is on the screen. So as you can see, the last character was 8 before I clicked the operator button. If I do it again, the last character should be 5 now. So as you can see, this was the last character that was previously on the display. So now I'm going to use an if statement here. I'm going to say if, going to be an if else statement. If current operation plus text content is equals, so we're going to create an array of our operator buttons. we are going to say dot includes in last character. This just means if the last character that was on the display is found in this array, if it's contained in this array, I can delete this. Then we want the last item on our display to be replaced. So we're going to say current operation dot text content should be equals to current operation dot text content dot slice 0 comma -1 plus the button that was clicked dot text content. The difference between this slice and this slice just means this one is going to return the last character, okay, while this is going to cut out the last character and return the numbers before that last character. So let's say we have something like 965. Slice -1 is going to return 5. While this, if we log this to the console, it's going to return 96 and cut out the 5. So when we do this plus the button content, let me show you how that works. Let me play. When I do 9 times and I click on another operator, it gets replaced, but I have to put this inside my else statements instead of it being outside for it to work. Okay, let me show you again. When I click on an operator and click on another operator, it gets replaced. Why? Because current operation dot text content dot slice 0 -1 gets, okay, let me click again. This returns only 9 and then it adds the next button that is being clicked. Okay, so this condition just means if the last character is found in this array, that is in this our operator array, then append it to whatever that is returned. So since this returns 9 and I click on another operator, since that operator is found in an array, it's going to get appended and the last operator gets cut out. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And then we now have the else statement. Else, if the last character is not found in this array, then just append it to whatever that is on our display. So in a situation where I do this, okay, let me refresh. In a situation where I do 9 times and the next button I click is a number, it just gets appended. Okay, it doesn't cut out anything. So that's how this condition works. I hope that makes sense. So we can now evaluate this to give us a result. Okay, so that's working fine. Now our operator buttons won't get repeated, rather it's going to be replaced. So the next thing we want to work on is, hey, let me show you this. When we have 0 as the first input and I click on an operator, it gets appended, right? But for the minus sign, I want the minus sign to replace the 0 instead of being appended. Okay, just because that's how an iPhone calculator works. Okay, like this. Okay, I want it to replace 0 instead of being appended. I'm going to come back here to my operator buttons and I'll say if current operation dot text content is equals 0 and button dot text content is equals to minus, it just replace it with, replace the current operation dot text content with the minus sign. Okay, so now when I do this, when I click on minus first, it gets replaced, but the other operators still work as intended. They still get appended. But let me show you a situation where this does not work. When I have something like this, 9 minus 9 equals 0, and I click on the minus sign. I want it to show 0 minus instead of minus. So we are going to have to put a condition here, and I'm going to use the ternary operator. I'm going to come here and I'll say if should reset screen is set to true, that is after we have completed one operation. If it's set to true, then current operation dot text content should be plus and equals to the minus sign. That is, if should reset screen is true, append the minus sign to whatever that is on the screen already. Else, just equate it to the minus sign. Let me show you. When I do this again, and I click on minus, it gets appended. Let me go over it again. This just means if should reset screen is true, then append the minus sign to whatever that's on the screen, to the current operation text content. Else, just equate this, just equate current operation dot text content to the minus sign. So that's how to use ternary operator. I'm going to come down, I'm going to come back here, and I'll set my screen back to false, just to make sure that it's back to default. Okay, and then I'm going to come down and say return, so that my if statement escapes here, so that it doesn't run any block of code under this. So let's check that out again. Alright, so as you can see, it's working fine. Now, did you notice that when I clicked on another number, everything got erased instead of being appended? So we want to come down here and set another. We want to come here and set another condition. We're going to say if we want to check if the screen is reset or not. If should reset screen is true, then set it back to false. And when I start another operation, it should work properly. So that's working well. But what I want to do is, once I am done with an operation and I click on another button, I want the previous operation to be reset as well. I'm going to come under here and say previous operation dot text content is going to be set to empty. So now when I do this and I click on another number, the previous operation should get cleared, as you can see. Now the next constraint we are going to set is on the decimal point. Okay, we don't want the decimal point to get repeated like this. We really want it to appear once on a number. So let me clear this. I'm going to go to my number buttons function, and I'll say let last number be equals the current operation dot text content dot split bracket. I'm going to be using a regular expression here, so I'll type the character class, and I'm going to come here and type the X sign and division sign. Let me come back and copy my division sign, paste it here. Then I'm going to escape the minus sign so that JavaScript treats it as the minus sign. Same thing for the plus sign. And then I'll come here and say dot up. So what this gives us is the last number that was inputted on our display. Let me log that to the console so we can see it. Last number. So now when I click on the number, we're going to see it on our console. 5. And I click on that number, it gives us the last number. And what this split does is it separates our string into an array. Okay, So if I have something like this times 9, it splits this into an array in such a way that we have 5, 7, 8 as one item, we have x as another item, and 9 as another item. What dot pop will do for us is that it's going to give us the last number in the array, which in this case is 9, as you can see here. If I click on that number, it gives us 97. So I hope you understand that. And I'm going to come back here and I'll say if button dot text content is equals 0 and last number includes a decimal point, then return. Sorry, it should be here. Okay, so what this means is if this should be the decimal point. If the button that was clicked is a decimal point, let's say I've clicked 4 and the number that has been clicked is the decimal point, and the last number includes points. That is this last number now. This is now our last number, and it includes a decimal point, then return. So when I do this, it should not work. I think we have an error somewhere. Okay, is the order of logic. We need to take this up for it to work. It needs to be above this if statement so that this doesn't run before this block. Okay, so let's do that again. When I click on a decimal point, it shouldn't get repeated, as you can see. I hope you understood the logic that we used here. This just means check if the button that was clicked is a decimal point, and again check if our last number includes a decimal point. So in this case, our last number is 6.6. Does it include the decimal point? Yes. Therefore, return since the both conditions are true. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is, let me show you on our finished project. When we have 0 in the beginning and I click on a decimal point, I want it to show as 0 point. Let me go back to our calculator, and not point, as you can see here. And also when I do something like this, 9 times, and I click on the decimal point, I want it to show as 0 point and not 9 times point, just like in our finished calculator. Okay, remember we are building this calculator to work just like a real iOS calculator. So this is how the iOS calculator works. If I do this, it shows as 0 point and not just points. So we want to work on that. So I'm going to come up here again, and we want to get the last character again like we did before. I'm going to say let last character equals current operation dot text content dot slice -1. Then I'm going to come here and say if current operation dot text content is equals to 0 and the button that was clicked, that is button dot text content, is equals to the decimal point, then we want to run this statement. We want to say replace the current operation dot text content, replace it with 0 point. Else if we're going to create an array again of our operator symbols. Then we'll say dot includes last character. So if the last character that was clicked is found in this array and the button dot text content is equals to 0, then we just want to append 0 to the current operation dot test content. Okay, so now our calculator should be working well. When I do something like this first, as you can see, it's now 0 point. It gets replaced. That is what this statement does. If, let me go back, it checks if the current operation dot test content is presently 0, and yes, it is. And it checks if the button dot test content is decimal point. That is, it checks if the button that was clicked is the decimal point, and in this case, yes. So it now says replace that 0 with 0 point. Okay, so now I can do something like this and it works well. Else, if last character, remember we have done what we said about last character is the last item on our display. If the last character is found in this array and the button dot test content is equals, sorry, this should be decimal point. Why do I keep writing 0? Then current operation, let me show you. When we do something like this, 5 and then times. Okay, so if the last character is in this array, is it in this array? That is true now because X is in this array, and it checks again if the next button that is clicked is the decimal point. Decimal point is the next button that was clicked, which makes it true. Then append 0 to the current operation dot test content. Append 0 to whatever that is on the screen. Okay, that is just before the decimal point. So you can see now that works well. Oh, and let me show you another constraint. When we finish evaluating a first expression and I want to go in with my decimal point, you can see it goes back to just a decimal point. It doesn't show as 0 point. So let's fix that. We want to check when the screen is true, when the screen has been reset. So we're going to go back to our condition and I'm going to put this in a bracket. And then I'll come here and say, or check when the screen is reset. That is, should reset screen. So in this case, if this is true, if the screen has been reset after an operation has been carried out, then replace whatever that's on the screen with 0 point. And we're just going to reset our screen back to the default mode, which is false. And I'm going to say return so that our if statement escapes here. Okay, so now when I do something like this and I go in with the decimal point, it should show as 0 point. And we also have to clear our previous operation dot text content here. It's going to be empty. So let's check it again. Okay, that's working well. If you notice, we have results overflowing our container. So we're going to come back to CSS. I'm just going to set the display to overflow hidden and white space no wrap to keep the text in one line so that it doesn't go below each other. So now that's working well. We also want to set the justify content on our current operation to flex end so that when, let me show you, so that we can always see the value of the last button that we clicked. You can see the value gets hidden. So we want it to always show. We're going to come back to current operation and I'll say display flex justify content flex end. So now we can now see the last digits that is being clicked. Okay, so the next thing we want to work on is to format our display values with a comma so that it's going to have a comma after every 3 digits. So we're going to come back to JavaScript. Just above my number buttons function. I'm going to come here and create another function, and the name of my function is going to be format numbers with commas, and then I'm going to give it a parameter of string. We want to split, okay, let me do this. We want to split this into parts so that we'll have 8 times 8. We'll have it separately. Okay, we're going to use the split method. I will say let parts equals string, that is our parameter, string dot split times as one item, 99 as another item, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to split it by the operators. And how to split it by the operators. Okay, so when we have something like this, we're going to have 9 as one item in the array times as one item, 99 as another item, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to split it by the operators, and I'm going to use a regular expression again. I'm just going to type this bracket, then a square bracket to define the character class, and I'm just going to type my operators plus, remember the slash is used to escape a character. Then I'm going to type my times and division. Let me come back here and copy my division. So now when I log this to the console, we're going to see it as an array. Let me show you. We're going to log paths to the console. I'm just going to come down here and call my function, but I'm going to pass it our string. Let's say 2 times 16 plus 50. Okay, so now we're going to get the paths in our console. Let me open it here. So you can see, we now have our function has split our string into different parts. We now have 2 as one item in the array. We have x as one item, 16 as one item. So it has split our string into different items in our array. And as you can see, our array length is 5. Okay, so let's go back. So let me delete this. Now I want to loop through each of the parts of my array. So I'm going to use a for loop, for bracket. I'm going to set the conditions. Let I equals 0, that is start at index 0, and then I should loop while it is less than path.length. That is, the loop should keep on going as long as I is less than the length of the array, and I plus plus. Okay, that is after each loop go to the next item in the array. That is what plus plus means. Then I'll open this and I'll say let paths equals paths bracket I. Then I'll come down and I'll say if we're going to the regular expression here again. I'll type this for the regular expression, and then I'll type this character which matches a digit dot test path. This regular expression character, that is D, checks if there is a digit in path, and we use this test method to check if there is a digit in path. So this returns either true or false. Then I'm going to write my statement. Let number paths be equals paths dot split. I want to split whatever we have as our number at the decimal point, so that we have the whole number before the decimal point and the decimal number after the point. Okay, so now this splits our number into different parts and returns it as an array. So I'm going to come under and say number parts 0, that is the first item in our array, equals, and the first part is going to be the whole number part, okay, equals number parts dot, we want to replace it. This is where we now add our comma, and we're going to be using a regular expression to do this. So I'm going to put my bracket, then I'll put this for the regular expression. I'm going to be using the G modifier here, that is the G flag, for performing a global search. And then I'm just going to do this. What this means is find a match but not at the beginning or the end of our string. So this helps us check where our comma is supposed to be inserted, so that our comma is not inserted at the beginning or at the end of our numbers. Okay, then I'm going to have another bracket, and then we have this quantifier. So this is actually called a look ahead, to check if the next characters match. Okay, then we have another bracket, and then we have the digits character again, to check if there is a digit, but we want to check if there is a group of 3 digits. This matches a group of 3 digits, and then we have the plus sign, so that the match is repeated for every group of 3 digits. And we have another bracket, and this time we're going to use a negative look ahead, and we have the digit character again. So basically what this does is to ensure that there isn't another digit after the group of 3 digits. Okay, so we're going to come here, and we can now replace it with a comma. Okay, then I'm going to come down and say parts I should equals number parts dot join. We want to join back the whole number part and the decimal part. And then I'm just going to come here and say return parts dot join. Again, this is now to join both the number and the operator, because we split it here before, we now want to join it back after the formatting has been done. Okay, so we're done with our formatting. I just want to come back here and say string equals string dot replace. I want to delete our comma, just before the formatting, so that in case that we already have a formatted number, it's going to clear the comma before the number gets formatted again, so that we don't have the commas placed in irregular places. So I'm going to use the regular expression again, comma. This is going to perform a global search, that is anywhere the comma is found, replace it with an empty string. So what I'm going to do now is to call this function. Okay, I'm going to come back to this point, and we're just going to come here in our number buttons function, and we're going to say current operation dot text content equals format number with commas, and we're going to pass into it the current operation dot text content, that is the value that is currently on our display. We want to format it with our function. So now our number should get formatted. Oh, that isn't working. I think we have an error somewhere. Let's go back to our function. Let's see. Okay. Oh, okay, this should be parts. Let parts equal to parts the parts I, because remember our variable is parts. So let's check that again. Yeah, it's working fine. So we're just going to call our function again under equals button, so that when we do something like this, you see the result isn't correct. and we also want our results to get formatted as well. So I'm going to come here and format my results. Brackets, format, number with commas. For this to work, we have to convert our results to a string. Okay, because our function is designed to work on a string. Remember, we used string methods like replace and split. So our result has to be a string as well. We're just going to convert this to string. Okay, so let's see if that works now. No, it doesn't still work. Okay, let's just find out what's wrong here. Let me go back and take a look at this. Okay, I think that's not working because we have to replace comma with, we have to delete our commas before evaluation because the browser is just reading the numbers wrong. So we're going to come back here and say dot replace. We want to replace our commas. I'm just going to replace it with an empty string. So let's hope that that works now. I'm going to come back here and do this. Oh yeah, so it works finally. So that's how to format your numbers. We want to also format our numbers in the delete button. So I'm going to put that here so that as we are deleting each button, we still, as you can see, the comma is being wrongly placed here. So we want to format it correctly. When we click on our delete button, I'm going to put a bracket and then I'll call my function. Sorry, this bracket should be here. All right, so now when we have something like this, and I want to delete, you see the comma gets placed correctly. When we have a long figure on our screen, we want to, the comma gets placed correctly as we are deleting. So that's what we want. All right, so I'm just going to go back to my equals button. Let me show you this. When we have something like this, this is going to give us an error on our console. So as you can see, it gives us an error. So we want to use a try catch block to be able to catch this error. So I'm going to come here and I'll type try catch. And we want to put all of this in our try block. And then here, so I'm going to current operation dot text content equals error. And then we're going to reset our screen. Should reset screen equals true. So now when we have an expression that's not correct, it should give us an error. You see, that gives us an error. So now that we've safely handled errors with the try catch block, we still want our calculator to work just like a real iOS calculator. So when I do something like this, I do not want it to show me an error. I want it to just return. And when we have something like this too, we want it to get evaluated. So the result will be 81 and not an error. So first of all, I'm just going to bring this up here. going to bring that up because I want to use the clean expression variable. So what we want to check for is for any operator at the end of our string. If there's an operator at the end of our string, then just slice it out, ignore it, and evaluate the expression. So I'm going to do that if, and we're going to use a regular expression, this, and then I'm going to type all our operators. Then the multiplication sign, we can use this sign now because I've already replaced it in this line of our code. Then we're going to skip the division sign as well. I forgot my brackets to define my character class, that is our square bracket. So if we have this at the end of a string, this symbol signifies the end of a string. If we have this at the end of a string, we want to test it in our clean expression. So if this returns true, then we want our clean expression to be equals cleaned expression dot slice 0 minus 1. So what this is going to do is that it will just slice out the last operator and evaluate. Okay, so let's check if that works. So as you can see, that works now, just like an iOS calculator. Okay, so the next condition we want to check for is when we have a number like this. Okay, we don't want it to evaluate. When we have a negative number or a negative decimal number, we don't want it to evaluate. It's just going to return. Okay, or when we have like just a single number, we don't want it to evaluate. So I'm going to come down here and create another if statement. I'm just going to copy this and I'll paste here. But in this case, we're going to say if these operators are not, I'm just going to delete this. So if we don't have these operators at all, that is when we have a single number, or if we have something like this, if we have a negative sign, actually a negative digit at the beginning of our string, and then the plus sign for a group of negative digits, and then a decimal point, this is to escape the decimal point, and a digit, then we have the plus sign, and then we're going to have this symbol which means that this decimal point is optional. That is, it can appear once or not at all. And lastly, we're going to have this symbol to show the end of the string. So what this says is match this pattern only if the string is a negative whole number or a negative decimal number and there's nothing else that comes after it. Okay, and I'm just going to test that in our cleaned expression, and if that returns true, we want to say return. Okay, so let's see if that works. And we have -6, it is not going to evaluate. But when we have -5.8, it is not going to evaluate. Okay, so that works, and we are coming to the end of this project. The last thing we want to work on is to make our negate button and percent button functional, and we also want to work on adjusting the font size of our input values. Okay, so the size reduces just a little bit as we are adding more numbers. So let's do that. I'm going to create another function just before my format number with commas function, and I'll say function. The name of my function will be adjust font size, and I'm just going to open this, and I'll say current operation dot style dot font size. We want to manipulate the font size from our JavaScript. Equals, let me come down here, and I'll say current operation dot text content. We're going to be using ternary operators here instead of an if statement. Okay, dot length. This is going to be our condition. So if this checks if the current number, the current length of the characters in our current operation, if it's greater than 14. So if there are more than 14 characters right here, if there are more than 14 characters, then we want to carry out this statement. We are going to make use of a string literal. I'm just going to do a little math operation here. I'm going to say 2.5 rem. Let me come here and write rem. So 2.5 rem minus, then I'm going to create a bracket, current operation dot text content dot length minus 14, and I want to multiply whatever we have here. I hope you can see this clearly. Let me just open this a little bit. I want to multiply whatever we have here by just a little fraction. Let's say by 0.15. Okay, so let me explain this whole calculation to you. This is current operation dot text content dot length. If we have numbers of more than 14 here, let's say we have about 20 characters in our display, it's going to do 20 minus 14, which is going to give us 6. Okay, and then we're going to have 6 times 0.15, because we're trying to reduce our font size gradually. Remember, so we're going to multiply by this small fraction of 0.15. So if we have 6 times 0.15, we're going to have 0.9. And then I set this 2.5 as the maximum font size. Okay, so we're going to have 2.5 minus 0.9, which is going to give us 1.6. So that means the text on our display is going to reduce to 1.6 rem. Okay, so, and just to make sure that our text never goes too small, regardless of the number of characters we have here. Like if we have like a lot of characters, we don't want it to get too small. So we're going to use the math.max method in JavaScript. I'm just going to put this in a bracket, and I'll come here and say math.max. And I'm going to come here and type 2, comma, this. So what this does, the math.max method always returns the maximum value in a group of numbers that you give to it. So in this situation, we have a value of 2, and after this calculation, we are going to have a value of 1.6. So it checks what is the maximum number here. It's going to be 2, so it returns 2 instead of 1.6. Okay, so this is just to check for a situation where our character is too long and we don't want it to go too small. It's just going to return 2. If not, if we have anything above 2, then it's going to return a larger number. If we have something like 2.2, 2.4, 2.5, it's going to return this. So after this, we're going to say else, just set it to 2.5 rem. And if you remember in our CSS, we set our current operation font size to 40 pixels. So we can go ahead and remove this. We don't need it anymore. Back to our JavaScript. So what we're going to do now is just to call our function. I'm going to go to the number buttons, and we're just going to call it here. Don't forget your semicolon, guys. I think I've forgotten that in a number of places, but yeah, I'm going to fix that later. So I'm going to go to the clear button as well and call it. And lastly, to our delete button. Okay, so let's see if that works. So as you can see, that works just fine. Our font reduces gradually until it reaches a font size of 2 rem, and it doesn't go any lesser than that. Let's see if it works well on the delete button. So yeah, as you are deleting, it goes back to the normal size as well, and when we clear, it goes back to the normal size too. Okay, so the last thing we're going to work on is on the negate button and percentage button. Phew, this has been a long project, but we have to finish it. I'm going to come here and say, and I'm going to add event listeners to my buttons. I'll say negate button dot add event listener, and then I'm going to add a click event. Then I'll create a constant variable called match equals current operation dot text content, and then we want our match variable to match this regular expression pattern. So I'm going to use the match method. So we want to always get the last number on our display. So in this case, 96 is going to be our last number. So we want to match for a pattern in our last number. First of all, we're going to have a bracket, and then we have an optional minus sign. This makes it optional. And we have a digit, and then we're going to have this bracket and another digit or a decimal point. Then we have this asterisk sign. Then I'm going to come here and put this sign, which signifies the end of the string. So let me go over it again. This just means match any number that might have a negative sign. This negative sign is optional, and then of course we have a digit, and then we have this to signify one or more digits or decimal numbers. Okay, this asterisk sign means one or more, and then we have this sign to show that it should be at the end of a string. So let's go back to our calculator. Why is our 0 so tiny? I think we forgot to call our function here. You can just call it outside. Adjust font size. Okay, so that the font size is automatically set to 2.5 rem. So let's continue with our negate button. I'm just going to come down here, and I'll create another constant variable called toggled. And I'm going to say match 0. Okay, because this returns an array of the last number we have in our string. So that string is always going to contain just one number, and that is the last number, which is why we're using match 0. Okay, dot start with a negative sign. So we are checking if our last number starts with a negative sign. If it does, then match 0 dot slice 1. So we want to get rid of the negative sign, else just return it with a negative sign. Okay, so what this is saying is if our last number already starts with a negative sign, then delete it. Okay, slice it out, else add a negative sign to the number. And I'll come down again and say current operation dot text content equals current operation dot text content dot replace. So I just want to replace that last number that we're getting with toggled here with the final number. Okay, so I'll say replace match with toggled. All right, but I want to format my final number in a case where we have more than 3 digits, maybe like 4 or 5. I want to format it with a comma. So I'm going to call my format number with comma function here. Okay, so let's check if that works. That doesn't work. Let's open our console and see what the issue might be. Say string that replace is not a function. Add format numbers with commas. Okay, so we're having an issue because this match, this is giving us a number, is returning a number, and our format numbers with commas is designed to work with string. So we have to make this, turn this into a string. So we're just going to use string literals. So as you can see, it's working perfectly. But what of in a situation where we have something like this? You can see it puts the comma in the wrong place. So I'm just going to come here. I want to change our regular expression pattern to be able to accommodate the commas. I'm going to come here and put a comma. Then I'll come here and I'll escape the decimal point and I'll make that optional. So this just matches 0 or 1 instances of a decimal point and then a digit and the asterisk sign. So this will match 0 or more number of digits after the decimal point. So let's see if that works now. Yeah, so it works. Let's check for the decimal point. So yeah, that works. But I just want to check for when we have 0 before any operation, then don't work. I'm going to come here and I'll say if should reset screen is not true and current operation dot text content is equals 0, then return. Okay, so when we have 0 at first, that doesn't work, but when we have something like this, so it should work now because should reset screen is now true. Alright, so let's make our percentage button to work, and that will be the last thing that we've got to do. So I'm going to say percent button dot add event listener, and it's going to listen for a click event. Then we're just going to use the same regular expression pattern we used here. just going to copy this and I'll paste it here. Then I'll come down and say const percent. We want to calculate the percent equals match 0, that is the last character, dot replace. We want to replace any comma with an empty string before we calculate the percent. But first we want to change our string to number by using pass floats, and then I'll say divided by 100 to calculate the percent. Okay, then I'm going to convert everything back to string so that our format to comma function can work well. So I'll come here and say to string. I'll come down again and say current operation dot text content equals current operation dot text content dot replace match 0. We want to replace it with the percent that we have calculated. I'm going to say format number with commas just to make sure that our answer is always formatted percent. And then I'm just going to reset the screen to true. So let's check that. When we have something like this, click of the percentage button, we want to change it to percent. So that works well. Let's check for decimal numbers. This should give us 0.065. All right, that works. Let's check for commas as well. Okay, so that works perfectly. And that brings us to the end of this project. This project has been a long one, but I hope you guys were able to follow me and understand my whole thought process in building this. Okay, so like I said earlier, I built this project to be as close to a real iOS calculator, but of course there are still some little things that are not exactly like the iOS calculator. Okay, but it still works. And one last thing that I would like you guys to do by yourself is, let me show you. In our original calculator, when we have something like this, you can see that this allows multiple operators here, because we can have an operation like this and it should work, as you can see, but we don't have that in our project. The last operator only gets replaced. So I want you guys to try that out by yourself and let me know how far you can go on that in the comment section. But I'm going to be leaving the source code of the original project, that is the correct version, on my GitHub, so do well to check that out if you want to see the main corrected version and code of this project. All right guys, so I really hope you guys learned a lot in this project. I really hope I was able to break down key JavaScript concepts in the simplest way that I could. Feel free to ask your questions in the comment section, and if you enjoyed this video, please do well to share it to your friends that might find it useful, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in our next video.